Welcome to Generating Demand, real stories from the B2B trenches, where we tell you our secrets, like how to establish thought leadership or rock your webinar registrations, and tips and tricks to drive sales-ready leads. Lean in, listen, and learn. We've got you covered. This podcast is brought to you by Virtual Intelligence Briefing.
Hi, and welcome to a new episode of our podcast, Generating Demand, Stories from the B2B Trenches. I'm super excited today to be here with Nicole Fusilier of Matterport. We have a really exciting story to share. In talking with her prior to this, I can tell you that Nicole is a revenue marketer through and through. She and I share some of the main passions of revenue marketing and demand generation marketing, and I think this is a really special story. So thank you for tuning in. I think you'll enjoy it. Nicole, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your experience at Matterport?
Sure. So I'm Nicole Fusilier, and I just really am very passionate about revenue marketing and the fact that, I believe revenue marketing is marketing with accountability. We're the sales organization's, best friend. And it's also my responsibility within marketing to be fighting for sales at all times. And so instead of, marketing and sales kind of having that relationship that at some companies, there's that kind of that push and pull, and it can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
In my world, it's more around how am I sales' best advocate within marketing? And then how do I have that relationship with sales? So that way we're just focusing on how we hit pipeline together. So I really love revenue marketing. And I think there's a different way of doing marketing where you can be sales' best friend and have a good relationship. And I think that's our future.
Yeah. Tell me about Matterport. It recently went public.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, this week or last week, right? Like brand new.
Yeah. It went public on the 23rd.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And I know that what you did at Matterport had a lot to do with that, going public. Some of the metrics that you shared with me, the state of marketing prior to and after is very impressive, I have to say. But tell me, they are a 3D technology company, right? They do spatial 3D imaging, spatial data. Yeah. And as a B2B marketer, they are selling to companies like insurance companies, real estate brokers, et cetera. Anybody that might need a 3D digital twin of their physical space. And that could include retail stores as well. So how big is the company? How many employees does the company have?
We're almost at 300 right now. And when
That's
I started,
awesome.
we were just under 200. So it's been growing pretty quickly.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you nailed it. It's around, having your spatial data and the things that you can do with your data. And I think the pandemic really opened up people's mind to what you can do with having the information around your space, right? And things that you can do that, normally people thought of Matterport as a 3D tour company for real estate, if you're buying and selling homes. But what people didn't really understand until they needed to was around when you have your data of your space, think about when you need to get an insurance or an appraisal done. Think about when you're trying to work with multiple people and they need to have access to your space, and they might need dimensions within your space. There's measurement tools that you can actually measure the dimensions within your space, but you don't have to physically be there. And, in a time recently, people couldn't physically come to your space. And then think about like how many windows, how many sockets that you have within your home. What if you have to get things repaired? Having that data all there in front of you without having to like go around your house and be like 1, 2, 3, like having that capability right there at your fingertips is what Matterport is about. And then over time, think about spatial data. If Matterport is like the Google of Google Maps, but this is about your data, think about if in New York City, and you want to know in New York City how many windows there are in New York City.
Wow.
Matterport would have the ability to tell you that. Just think about the type of data questions that you could ask about, your community that you'll need to be able to have, and it's pretty cool to think about, spatial data and what, having that information around your space and what that can change. And I think, when I say change, I think what type of information it can help you with so you can make changes.
Yeah.
kind of cool. It's very cool,
It
actually.
is cool. Well, just in my own world, we are doing our custom closet right now, and that's a very small use case, I'm sure, comparatively. But I can see it would have saved a couple trips on a couple different people's behalfs to come out and look at the space and figure out all those dimensions and such. So that is very, very cool. Congratulations on the IPO. That's huge.
Thanks.
Tell me a little bit more about the state of revenue marketing. I know you've been with them for a little over 2 years now. When you joined 2 years ago, it was a very different department and world. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when I joined Matterport in 2019, the marketing organization was over budget. We had never made our numbers. We had 200 different ways of doing attribution. Our systems weren't set up to actually really show how marketing was contributing to our bottom line. So when I came in, the first thing that I was focusing on is like, how can we show what we're doing, and how are we hitting our targets, and where our gaps are? As I mentioned, we were over budget. Well, within a month of my being there was leadership change, and so for 8 months, I was put in charge of marketing, which was, not something that I was expecting, but it was a great opportunity. And honestly, the mindset of a revenue marketing was really important in this case, because we were over budget and because we weren't hitting our numbers. This was really about, how do you fix that relationship with marketing and sales, and how do you really come up with an approach that you be able to hit your numbers. There are times in marketing organizations where you need a brand categorization person. You need somebody that can understand, kind of that, how you can get that brand voice. But in this case, Matterport needed somebody who could come in and really help fix how marketing was operating and helping the company hit their numbers. So really what I did was really just change all of our KPIs. All of our KPIs became around pipeline targets, SQLs. And by changing the way that we were looking at the work that we were doing to support sales and making it focused on pipeline goals, we immediately started seeing a good ROI. For paid media, for example, I cut my paid media budget in half, changed the KPI from an MQL to SQL, and we made more SQLs and more pipeline, within that next quarter. Within 1 quarter, we were on budget and started hitting our numbers, and we made our numbers 6 quarters in a row. So it's really about, how do you look at operational efficiency that's going to drive pipeline and revenue, and stop focusing on MQLs, stop focusing on noise. I can bring in MQLs all day, but if I focus on how I'm going to help sales hit a revenue target, and I take a revenue target and I take an attribution to help sales be effective, then you get rid of that old marketing and sales, what are you doing for me type of approach. It's like, no, my job is to help you be successful. So let's agree on what successful looks like. And what I give you, let's measure that what I give you is actually going to help you sell. And so that's really was the game changer for marketing and sales, being able to hit our numbers.
So Nicole, there was so much meat in there, especially for maybe a newbie to revenue marketing, that I want to sort of unpack that, because it's really a truly powerful story. So let's take it back from the beginning. When you joined, the company was not just over budget, but I think you said millions over budget.
Yeah, we were at 3 million over budget. Yeah.
And which is insane to me. I mean, even having a $3 million budget is amazing. Not many marketers can say they have budget authority over, multiple $1 million. So that alone but to say that all that was sort of wasted, going over budget, shows a definite inefficiency of spend. And then you said the KPIs that the company was then driving were, I think you said you were reaching, not even 50% of your goals, spending all this money. So just a truly inefficient funnel. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's when I think what happened is that there was so much focus on how many MQLs. I mean, literally they were focused on how they could get more MQLs into sales. Mm-hmm. Right. And when you operationalize and focus everything on MQLs, what happens is your spend increases, because you're just doing programs that drive MQLs, and you're not caring about your customer acquisition costs that actually drives revenue. You're not caring about sales efficiency. All you're saying when you have an MQL number is, I'm going to hit this target of MQLs. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier. I could buy MQLs all day. I could spend a lot of money. And I think, it's actually kind of funny, like things that I was hearing before I got there were conversations around like, oh, I'm going to bring in more MQLs than you. And I'm like, well, does that really matter? Right.
Does it matter? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, well, if you don't convert, who cares? I said, so, for me, it was like really coming in and saying, okay, guys, what's our plan? What's our
Mm-hmm.
target? What's our goals? I mean, they really didn't have revenue target goals. They all had just MQL goals. But there really
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that conversation around, well, do these MQLs actually drive to a number? And so
Mm-hmm.
that was the real change, is around, well, can we agree on, if I'm going to be doing paid media, for example, what is the cost of paid media on that SQL that makes it worth it for
Mm-hmm.
Matterport for me to be focusing on that spend? And we agreed to a certain price around anything under this customer acquisition cost. It's a good ROI for Matterport, right? So really knowing what
Mm-hmm.
that is. And then the second thing is really understanding, who's your ideal customer profile that you're going after, and really
Mm-hmm.
going after that profile and partnering with sales to say, if this is an SQL, what percentage of your SQLs close? And we went, from a, 25 to 35% conversion of our SQLs to a 54% conversion of our
That
SQLs.
is
So what?
huge.
Because
Huge.
all we focused on was who would buy, like who is the
Right.
right person to go after. And to me, that's why I say revenue marketing is sales accountability. It's about
Yeah.
how to help sales close deals. And
Yeah.
I think it's a shift from how marketing used to support sales. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for the brand categorization and the awareness work that needs to happen. There absolutely is. But how I
Mm-hmm.
see that is that just opens up our demand funnels.
Mm-hmm.
Not like those MQLs come in and then that we should automatically send them over to sales organization. I believe what those do is start opening up my funnels so I could be even more targeted.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting right now is some of the conversations that I have right now is, you know, at one point, you could spend millions of paid media money and you can then identify a conversion and like, oh, spend more, spend more, spend more. And you can see the ROI. And my answer to that is why? Why would I spend more when I know that I'm going to get the best quality out of X? If I spend
Mm-hmm.
more, it's not necessarily going to result into the conversion that you want. And I know there's a lot of, I would say kind of older school thinking, especially more from a B2C environment. Well, then like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if you spend X, I know that we're going to be able to get this. And I'm like, well, think of the price point that you have. If
Yeah.
for us, it's a Pro 2 camera is like, it ranges anywhere from $2,495 up to $3,000. It's like, and then you add the SaaS plan, we're talking about a $3,000 product. A
Mm-hmm.
paid media plan to drive a $3,000 product, you can't scale that forever. It's not
Right.
like it's a SaaS. Like if we were just focusing on the SaaS part of it, then sure, you can have kind of a flywheel that's really helping really focus on how do you convert startups or signups. And so I think it's like really more understanding, that paid media motion really only works when you've got something that is this lower cost that really provides a value immediately. And when you're
Yeah.
talking about a $3,000 price point, that flywheel needs to change. So it's,
Yeah.
it's it's just an interesting approach how marketing needs to come to the table with data and information around how you're going to be able to hit your numbers, and that's different than what I think most marketing people do today.
Yeah. Well, there's something you said in there that really was a resounding point for me. So when you talked about it, when you first came into the company and the team had an MQL goal and they were just going after MQLs, and like you said, if an MQL means nothing, right, unless it converts. And it sounds to me like at that point, the company really did not have alignment to the end goal, which, as you say, revenue marketing is about driving revenue, right? And if there isn't an alignment, and I think sometimes that's a good note for leadership too, because some leaders will just assign the department, here's your MQL goal, hit it, we'll handle the rest. But if you don't add that context of, we're trying to drive this much revenue for the company to hit our company goals, and this is how your MQL number fits into those company goals, then that context can go so, so far. I know when I have a calculator that I have built that calculates like, this is the revenue goal, this is our average deal size, this is our conversion from opportunity to closed won, all the way down to how many MQLs do I need to drive and what's my conversion on that. And of course, there's things you can do to fine tune that that funnel all the way through.
Right.
But that, it sounds like you walked in, that context was missing and everyone was missing the point. It's not just about driving an MQL number. It's actually about driving the revenue to it. And so helping the marketing function and department.
Yeah, I would even go so far as I don't even care about the MQLs. I know there's equations and math.
Exactly.
I'm like, I don't care. Like, because I believe in throwing that MQL out the window and just focus on SQLs. Yes, of course, things come in as MQLs.
Yeah.
I see it as increasing my pipeline, increasing my my database. I see that as growing my database.
Exactly.
Right. So all MQLs
is
increasing my database size, but just measure me on SQLs. Don't measure me on MQLs.
Yeah. And I have worked at companies where we've gone so far to measure against marketing contributed pipeline, right? Like you have sales sourced pipeline, marketing sourced pipeline. And I know in one of the companies that I've worked for, marketing was driving more than 50% of pipeline and like 70% of closed won, because the quality of the buying, the quality of the leads we were driving were people that were, our definition required that they were in a buying cycle.
Right.
And we partnered with sales on that definition, and we shook hands and agreed, this is what an MQL means, this is what an SQL means, and this is what, this is when we open an opportunity. And so at that handoff, we all agreed to the definitions, which made for a really strong relationship there. So
yeah, it's great.
I love. And then I don't want it to go unsaid, because you said it very quickly in passing, and I want to really just drive it home. You said, back when you started, Matterport was millions of dollars over budget, not achieving, halfway, 50% of the KPIs to goal of KPIs. And now 6 quarters in a row, tell me more about where Matterport is today. 6 quarters in a row, marketing has met or exceeded KPIs. Yeah.
Our targets. And really how we look at that. And I really look at, looking at what I've forecasted. It's, to me, this is where looking at what's happening week over week. And, when I think about like every channel, every sales channel that I have has to have a target, has to have a go-to-market plan. I need to be able to see how does each of those organizations plan on hitting those goals. Right. And I think, and I like that my CRO says this: hope isn't a strategy.
Yeah.
having a defined plan and having targets around each one of those activities that you're doing, and really being able to measure those week over week, how you're doing. So part of the reason why, we're able to keep hitting our numbers is looking every week, the programs and the tactics that we put in place that were part of a strategic plan, how do they actually perform? And so I'm not finding out that I'm not going to make my numbers at the last minute. I should know every week, where am I? And so having that ability to know where I am, it doesn't become a surprise to anybody. So I can start fixing things immediately. And I think that's where some teams, like, they wait until the end of the month, or they wait until the end of the quarter, like, oh, crud, I'm not going to make my numbers, right? That doesn't work. You have to look at that every week around what you targeted, what you predicted, how is that coming in? And predictions change and the world happens around you. And so being able to adapt and recognize how that means, and that might mean one channel is performing better than another. So take advantage of that and shift as those things are changing. Don't just stay flat and say, well, here's my plan. It's like, here's my plan. Then what's actually happening, and shifting real time to that, and knowing that you have that flexibility, and then ensure that your targets are in a place that you will always exceed your plans. So that way you've actually planned in terms of your targets to exceed it. So you have some of that room to learn and to grow. And I think that's, when I think back into when I was younger driving some of the stuff, we were really just focused on like our side of the house. And we weren't thinking about how, like you said, how it all came through. And I said, so being able to like have a revenue call every week and really focus on how are we doing and getting ahead of it versus, it's more around like the agencies that I work with who know me, they know I have more of an aggressive approach, which is I want to be ahead of it. I want to be ahead of it. I don't want anything to be a surprise. I'm ahead of the situation. If you start from an offense, you have a much better chance of always being ahead. If you start from a defensive position, you're always behind and you're always trying to catch up. So it's about being ahead. It's about being ahead and having an offensive, aggressive approach to what you're going after.
Yeah. So, another word for that might be proactive, right? I know when I was running marketing departments, what I had seen, what we did was we had quarterly planning. And that's new for a lot of companies, be it a startup or an older company that might be growing or scaling. I think there's a couple underlying things there that might not, be obvious, maybe obvious to you and I, but maybe not obvious to others. The quarterly plan is huge. Excuse me. Having the revenue goals, and now as a public company, you won't be able to get away from that quarterly plan, right? Like you're going to live that quarterly plan. But for other maybe private companies that aren't there yet, the quarterly plan, having a quarterly revenue number and doing that waterfall backwards, so that marketing has a quarterly KPI, and then I call it progress to goal, reporting on that every week. And even if that reporting, we were the company I was with, everyone was meeting logged, and I didn't want to have meetings just to say here's where we are. So we did a Confluence page each week and reported our goal and our progress to goal for that week. And then the next week we would just add to the top of that so that anybody in the organization could follow along where we were to goal. And as you say, reporting on it on a weekly basis is so huge because you are reporting progress to goal. You can't wait until the end of the month, right? You have 3 months and a quarter. If you're looking at it only twice a quarter, you're sunk, right? It's not going to happen. So I think that is really valuable advice. And if our audience members lift anything from it, that is a key point that I would suggest. It's been so fun talking with you. I could talk with you for hours.
I'm a little bit passionate. Can you tell? I talk really fast and I get really excited. So I appreciate you taking a step back on certain stuff because I just love it. I love revenue marketing and I love the relationship that you can build with the organization because you're building basically a trust relationship that we're going to be doing in this together.
Yeah. And I love being successful, right? I love saying, this is my target. I will meet or exceed this target. Another thing you mentioned, I call it the bottoms up plan, which is, you have your quarterly KPIs figured out, the quarterly revenue numbers, waterfall backwards to the quarterly marketing KPIs, your weekly progress to goal. But one of the things you mentioned was your strategic tactics and plan. Again, going back to that quarterly planning, I call that the bottoms up plan.
Yep.
I once worked with a large company I won't mention, but the executive team came down like from above and said, marketing, you will hit all these goals. And we were like, those goals are crazy. I mean, it's beyond the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's beyond that. It's like into wishful thinking. Like there's no way that we can build a bottoms up plan to hit that goal. And I think that showed a misalignment between leadership and the team that actually does the execution. So I think that's something to call out as well, of like having the alignment there, knowing that when you're building that bottoms up plan, you have a couple things to work with. You have the seasonality of the calendar, you might have trade shows or like you said, other events or seasonality that might be happening in that quarter, days off, like the holidays. Then you have your budget. How much do you have to spend? And then you have your vendor relationships. You mentioned your agencies there. And so that's what I call the bottoms up plan or the Tetris game that I love to play. How are we going to fit all these things in and over deliver on our KPIs? So it sounds like you guys have that pretty nailed down in order to meet or exceed your goals 6 quarters in a row. So that is awesome. We'll have to have another episode where you tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
That would be huge.
You're absolutely right. I think a lot of times, like I said earlier, hope is not a strategy, right?
Exactly.
And I think without having that bottoms up plan and being able to, and I will tell you, sometimes even folks on my team are like, really? We have to go to this much detail? And I'm like, yes, we do.
Actually, yes.
Yes, we do. And so I know sometimes like I might drive some folks nuts because I'm like, that plan, as you just said, helps break down how we're going to hit that higher number, right? And so without having that plan in place. Like you can't just focus on the tactics and not know how it all rolls up. Like, so you
Exactly.
have to have it both ways. You can't just have this, huge number that you have to hit and not actually break out how you're going to hit it. And I think sometimes like that's where things get a little bit out of whack because people
Mhm.
aren't doing both of those approaches. They might be
Yeah.
doing one, or they might just be, doing one and then halfway doing another. It's like, it won't work. You have to do them both.
Yeah, it's really valuable. And if there's any newbie marketers out there, I think that's another point to drive home for our audience. So tell me, Nicole, we are towards the end of our podcast. I like to ask all of our guests to share a couple resources that have helped them in their career. We all start from somewhere
Mhm.
in our career, and we can't do it alone, right? We're not islands. So any things that you embrace or have helped you along the way to get to your level of expertise and or your level in your career that may be beneficial to others. And I will say that we ask that all of our guests that share these resources are not affiliated to these resources. So these are true and authentic resources that that you have benefited from as on your rise upward.
Absolutely. So I think for me, there's two things. There's just really the community as a whole. I've been lucky to have some mentors. I've been happy to have some coaches that I've really admired over the years that I've been working for. And I've been blessed to work at some really big named companies, and I've been blessed to work at some smaller companies, and just been working with those communities and learning from others and having mentors who have taken me aside and just really helped kind of lift me up. I really believe like there's a whole, initiative around, women and how the women really reach out and help each other. And I've been very fortunate to have a few women really kind of take me aside and be really big mentors for me. And I
That's
really hope
awesome.
to pay that forward as well too, and really kind of help the community as a whole. I think the other one that has been a big resource for me, and it's more around how I like to operate, which is the golden rule: treat others as I would like to be treated. And when I think about the sales organization, I think about the partnership that I like to build. I mean, two core values for me are trust and respect. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know that the chief revenue officer that I'm partnering with, he knows I have his back. He knows I
Mm-hmm.
respect him and he respects me. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we agree that we're going to hit a target, we're going to do everything we can to do it together. There's no game playing. It is, as I said earlier to you, I think one-on-one, I'm the most direct, honest person you're going to meet because I don't believe in any of those types of games. I just don't. And so to me, trust and respect are really important. And it's like treating people how I would like to be treated. And that's how I think about, marketing and sales is there's a lot of stuff that happens. And I'm like, you don't need it. You don't need
Yeah.
it if you can have that relationship. And if, and I really think my job is to really show the organization and sales that I'm fighting for them. And that, if they start seeing what I'm doing, then they treat me that same way. And they know that I'm their advocate. They know that I'm the person within marketing fighting for them. And so that's why the golden rule is so important to me, because it's how I want to live, and it's how I want to work, and it's how I want to play. And that's
Yeah.
being kind of that trust and just respect and be good to others.
I think that's huge. That sales and marketing has a long-standing, rivalry, if you will, where fingers get pointed and blame gets thrown around, and I would say in poorly defined teams, that those things can happen. And your attitude and your approach to how you support each other is huge, and it's really incredibly valuable for those people listening. So
It
thank you
makes me
so
love
much.
my job. I can, if you enjoy working with your people and there isn't that kind of, like you said, rivalry, it makes it more fun. It makes it like you
Yeah.
love what you do. I think when that like who wants to feel like they're being poked at or like they're not appreciated? Nobody wants that. Either side
No.
wants that. So it can really just be a better environment, and I believe in that.
Yeah, I think it's huge. It's a great attitude. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your story. It's been a passion project of mine, and it's so great to talk with someone who shares that passion. And I'm really thrilled you could be here today. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
If you have any questions, want to suggest topics, or have ideas for guest speakers, drop us a line at podcast@virtualintelligencebriefing.com. To learn more of our demand generation secrets, visit vibriefing.news or grab the link in our show notes.